It's my pleasure to introduce ASEA's Chief Executive Officer, Chuck Funke.
Thank you, Jason. And just to set everybody's mind at ease, I will not be singing to you today. So, Jason, that was great. We always love having you, and we're appreciative of you being here with us. You know, when we concluded the 2019 convention last year in Las Vegas on September 14th, it would have been impossible to foresee the health, economic, and societal upheaval that has occurred around the world over the past 7 months. With you, we have observed, participated in, and been affected by the societal shifts and disruptions that are happening in real time before our very eyes. 2020 indeed changed a lot of things for all of us, and even before it was half over. If we isolated and examined just one of these monumental disruptors, COVID-19, there's simply no denying the impact it alone has had on individuals, families, and businesses. This world is certainly no stranger to calamities. Natural disasters, wars, political unrest, famines, and social injustice have and continue to play out all too frequently across the globe. But usually, such calamities are isolated to a particular country or a particular region. COVID-19 is a global pandemic. Never before in our lives have we experienced something that impacts all the citizens of the world simultaneously. As a global company, ASEA does business in 33 countries. We have physical offices and an employee presence in 8 of those countries. We've been particularly concerned about ASEA associates and employees around the world and have been in close contact with field management and in-country leaders to monitor the rapidly changing situations in your respective countries. Our greatest concern is always for the health, safety, and well-being of everyone associated with the ASEA family. You know, 2020 has really introduced another concept that has become ubiquitous since the onset of COVID-19, and it's uncertainty. Back in March, when we made at the time a very difficult decision to cancel the North American Vision Conference, little did we know at that time that it would be the first domino to fall as the Ascent trips, Diamond Summits, Taiwan anniversary event, a Hong Kong office opening, and grand opening events in the Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia all fell victim to the global pandemic. What was intended to be an epic 10-year anniversary celebration in Anaheim, California has been replaced with a much more modest webvention. And perhaps, as Tyler mentioned, the greatest loss in these postponements or cancellations has been the ability to be together. One of the defining characteristics of a family is the need or desire to gather. As an ASEA family, we miss the opportunity to see each other in person. Events and gatherings are a key component of our cultural underpinnings, and with you, we look forward to the time when we will be able to be together again. At the close of last year's convention, Tyler outlined the vision of ASEA by sharing with you a series of ASEA will statements. You've seen many of these, and you will see many of them throughout the day. These are statements that will allow you to show what has been happening over the past 12 months to move us closer to the fulfillment of these particular statements. I'd like to take a moment to focus on one of those particular statements, which reads, ASEA will continue to be run as a legacy business that will protect, preserve, and provide stable legacy income to our field partners for decades to come. You've seen the significance of legacy in the pillar statements that Tyler just addressed with a specific call out of we are legacy. In fact, Verdis' decision to take ASEA into the network marketing distribution channel was directly influenced by his vision of leaving a legacy to all of us by taking ASEA to the world. Against this backdrop of such global uncertainty, a discussion around what we mean by this idea of legacy seems altogether appropriate. When we look back on the past 10 years, it has been nothing short of incredible what ASEA has accomplished. For many of you, ASEA has completely transformed your lives as you've seen many lifelong dreams and ambitions come to fruition through your business. Books could be written on the impact ASEA has had on people's physical health, their economic health, and sense of purpose over the past 10 years. But legacy can't just focus on the past. Indeed, legacy must point us to the future. The concept of legacy suggests that there is something of inherent value that is worthy of protecting, preserving, growing, and ultimately handing down to those who come after us. For us collectively, ASEA is that thing of inherent value. It's no coincidence that back in 2016, when the ASEA core values were introduced for the first time at the annual convention, one of those values was sustainability. The description of that value says, our responsibility, it's collective, our responsibility is to continue to build on an extraordinary foundation and ensure growth and stability for years to come. It doesn't matter if this is your 10th convention or your first, we all have the opportunity to take that responsibility seriously. Of all the amazing things that ASEA offers, perhaps one of the most amazing is the opportunity that you have to build your own personal legacy within ASEA. For some, building your ASEA business and all that's associated with it can alter lives and build a legacy in numerous ways. For others, your ASEA business may provide you with the opportunity or the financial means to build and develop a legacy elsewhere in your life. What we want our individual legacies to be is up to us and will likely be informed by our life experiences and choices. Let me use an example to illustrate how what we have experienced in our lives, which can include tragedy and setback, can inform and expand our futures. Growing up, I loved listening to Paul Harvey. Many of you may know that name. He was a legendary radio broadcaster whose career spanned from 1952 to 2008. I first heard this story from him and will use his account, though it has been documented by others as well. The story is about a little boy. It's a true story, and it's a sad story. His name was Walter Elias. He was a city boy by birth, and before he was 5, his parents moved from Chicago to a farm just outside Kansas City, Missouri. And it was there on that farm that Walter would have his first encounter with death. Walter was only 7 on that particular summer afternoon, and it was the perfect day for a young fellow to go exploring. And just beyond a grove of graceful willows was an apple orchard. There Walter could make believe to his heart's content that he was lost, which he never was, or that he had captured a wild animal, which he never had. But today was different. Directly in front of him, about 30 feet away, perched in the low, drooping branch of an apple tree, and apparently sound asleep, was an owl. He remembered his father telling him that owls rested during the day so that they could hunt at night. What a wonderful pet that little bird would make, he thought. If only Walter could approach it without awakening it and snatch it from that tree. As he inched closer, he eventually found himself directly under the limb where the owl was perched. Slowly, he reached up with one hand and grabbed the bird by its leg. He had, in fact, captured it. But the owl, waking suddenly, came alive like no other animal Walter had ever seen. In a flurry of beating wings, wild eyes, and frightened cries, it struggled against the boy's grasp. Walter, stunned, held on. Now, it's difficult to imagine how what happened next actually happened. Perhaps it was the response sparked by gouging talons or by fear itself. But at some point, the terrified boy, still clinging to the terrified bird, flung it to the ground and stomped it to death. When it was over, a disbelieving Walter gazed down at the broken heap of feathers, and he cried. Walter ran from the orchard, but later returned to bury the owl. Each shovelful of earth from the shallow grave was moistened with tears of deep regret. And for some time thereafter, the owl actually visited Walter in his dreams. Ashamed, he would tell no one of the incident until many, many years later, but by then, the world forgave him. For that sad day and lonely summer in the early spring of Walter Elias brought with it an awakening of the meaning of life. Walter never, ever again harmed a living creature. And although all the boyhood promises could not bring that one little owl back to life, through its death, a whole world of animals came into being. For it was then that a grieving 7-year-old boy, attempting to atone for a thoughtless misdeed, first sought to possess the animals of the forest while allowing them to run free, by drawing them. Now the boy too is gone, but his drawings and his vision and his legacy live on in the incomparable, undying art and creativity of Walter Elias Disney, Walt Disney. In March of 1938, the New York Times published an article titled Disney's Philosophy. Here's the opening of that article, and I quote, "An owl drowsing in the cool shade of a tree on a Missouri farm one afternoon 30 years ago influenced the career of a man and helped fashion the fantasy of an era. That owl is the only thing that Walt Disney ever harmed." The incident has haunted him over the years. Occurring in a formative period, it directed his attention subconsciously to the birds and gentle beasts that play such an important part of his craftsmanship and helped to shape his philosophy, close quote. I think there is an extraordinary lesson in this story, particularly at a time when so many of us are trying to make sense of what seems senseless. What was a tragic and traumatizing event for a young Walt Disney informed his vision and passion for the future. It is no coincidence that nearly every Disney movie produced while Walt was alive had an owl in it. When we experience difficulty, tragedy, fear, frustration, and loss, we are presented with an interesting set of choices. We can let these things paralyze, depress, and frustrate us, or we can allow them to shape and inform our view of the world moving forward and propel us to places we otherwise might not have gone. Experiencing challenges and difficulty without learning and growing from them would be like taking a very difficult trip to go on a cruise to an exotic location and then simply never leaving your cabin. We have a living example of this in our own Sue Brenchley. I share the following observations with her permission. Following the tragic loss of a loved one several years ago, Sue channeled her grief and loss into being a source of strength to others who were suffering in similar ways. I know that Sue's experience has given her the ability to connect with and comfort people in a way that very, very few people can. I have seen her do it. For her, when confronted with all the questions and emotions of losing a loved one, she chose not to ask why, but rather she looked around at what good can come from this. In a conversation recently, Sue told me that the hardest things we have to do in life, if we allow it, those things will become the greatest forces for good in our respective lives. Sue Brenchley is building a legacy of compassion, empathy, and love to so many people who rely on her as a source of strength. Thank you, Sue. So how does legacy inform our attitudes and behaviors as an organization? First, it means, and you heard this from Tyler, that we are in it for the long haul. It's a great thing to be able to celebrate 10 years as a company. You are all familiar with the data that indicates that less than half of new companies make it to 5 years and only about a third make it to 10. These survival rates have been remarkably consistent over time. Not only has ASEA made it to 10 years, but in that time, through your dedicated efforts, ASEA has broken into the top 50 of all global network marketing companies, coming in at number 43 in 2019. Building a legacy business requires investment in critical infrastructure that will allow the business to grow and scale for years to come. Such investments are not always exciting or even visible, but they are absolutely essential to ASEA's ability to support your ongoing business building efforts. Building a legacy business requires confronting and assessing a never-ending parade of risk, prioritizing them, and then systematically working to mitigate them. It is unglamorous work, but ignoring threats to our business model or pretending they don't exist is not a strategy that any legacy company has adopted. Building a legacy company requires adherence to proven financial principles and practices. As an example, in early March, as the full impact and weight of the global pandemic was becoming evident, we took a number of measures to ensure the financial viability of the company should we enter a prolonged period of lockdown or economic uncertainty. We were alarmed by the dramatic spike in job losses that saw unemployment rise to levels not seen since the Great Depression. Here at ASEA, numerous financial scenarios were developed to model different economic possibilities, and then plans were put in place should any of those possibilities become realities. Moreover, our company's lack of any significant or long-term debt has proven to be an enormous advantage as we take steps to navigate the uncertainty that lies ahead. Later today, you're going to hear from Jerem Webb, where he will highlight the importance of our redox technology and the critical role it plays in ASEA becoming a legacy company. Many of you may actually be wondering exactly how ASEA is doing, given the fact that, well, given that it's still 2020. If I may, I'd like to take a moment and give an update on the state of the business. First, though, let me say that there is a level of discomfort in talking about company performance during a time where so many people are struggling or find themselves in difficult circumstances. I share this update from a perspective and sense of gratitude and with the acknowledgement that so many companies and industries find themselves in far less favorable conditions. I must first acknowledge that the ingenuity and creativity displayed by ASEA associates and employees to keep the business moving forward has been extraordinary. Many traditional business building practices were rendered unusable nearly overnight as societies went into varying levels of lockdown. Web conferencing, something that was historically used to simply augment other activities, became the very bedrock of our business models nearly overnight. And it's a humbling thing to be able to report to you today that sales volume for 2020 is up in every region of the world over 2019. And keep in mind that 2019 was a historic sales year for ASEA. Global enrollments are ahead of last year with some of the largest enrollment weeks in company history coming in just the past few months. And the number of orders coming through auto ship are at the highest levels in company history. Our manufacturing team has been able to operate with minimal disruption since the onset of the pandemic, and inventory levels of our redox products remain relatively stable around the world. This is remarkable given the disruption that has occurred with global shipping lines, where we saw some markets completely close their ports for a period of time. All operational aspects of ASEA have continued to function with continual adjustments being made to address issues and challenges as they arise. This is a significant thing in that about 75% of the ASEA employees have been working remotely and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Now, these outcomes should not necessarily come as a surprise to any of us, given that the world needs now more than ever what we can offer. But hopefully, there is a collective sentiment of appreciation regarding ASEA's ability to navigate such difficult times. In commemoration of our 10-year anniversary, we are happy to announce that beginning next month, you will notice a new label on the ASEA REDOX supplement bottle. These labels are scheduled to run in all ASEA markets over the next 12 months and are designed to serve as visual reminders of the foundation that has been laid over the past 10 years. It is certainly a great thing to be able to celebrate such milestones, but all of us know that we are destined for far greater things. Although we, of course, honor and appreciate our past, our commitment and focus are aimed squarely at the future, or in other words, our legacy. We have much to do and much to accomplish. I've said many times that it is not particularly difficult to grow a business. Growing a business profitably is quite another matter, and growing a profitable business year after year after year is how legacy companies are built. Not overnight and not by hype or gimmicks, but by the relentless, methodical, systematic drive to be better today than we were yesterday. You know, 10 years is really not a very long time for a company. Years ago, I had the opportunity to work for one of the great financial institutions in the United States. I was fortunate to be there when they celebrated their 150th anniversary. Their history comprised of navigating the Civil War, 2 world wars, the 1918 pandemic, the stock market crash of 1929, and the subsequent Great Depression, and countless others, disruptions, crises, calamities, not to mention competitive and regulatory threats. When I think back about things like that in companies that have been around that long, it makes me realize that we have a long way to go. The story of ASEA for the past 10 years is in the history books. We now must look forward to the next 10 years and the 10 after that. Sure, there have been challenges, setbacks, and frustrations all along the way. That will always be the case. Any lasting success is laced with difficulty. But there has also been enormous good unleashed on lives around the world that all stem back to the critical decision made by Verdis and Tyler over 10 years ago to take a revolutionary, largely unknown technology and marry it with the passion and commitment of network marketing. I will close today by expressing my unapologetic optimism about the future. That may seem like a strange thing to say given the state of the world right now, but that is how I feel. We will get through the many challenges that currently beset us. History has shown that we humans are a resilient lot. Yes, we will have to pivot and adjust and adapt, just like the generations did that came before us, and we will. And finally, I feel it important to call our attention to the ASEA core value of humanity, which simply states that people matter regardless of what they can do for us or what role they play. That principle seems more important today than it's ever been. And later today, Tyler will be sharing a critically important message of unity and civility, which is so desperately needed in our world right now. As members of the ASEA family, we are all part of a global, worldwide movement. We are made up of different cultures, races, languages, traditions, and customs, and yet we are one. We are bound together by the great mission and vision of this company, and may we all have the resolve to do our part to ensure that the legacy of ASEA lives on for generations to come. Thank you.